Hi everyone, welcome once again to my YouTube channel, Dr. Quesero TV, and to my show of each Saturday, Ask the Cheese Doctor. This is an open window for anyone that wants to learn how to make cheese at home or commercially. Today we're going to talk about a very common problem that happens when we are making cheese. And today I'm going to do some kind of troubleshooting. Um, I'm going to explain all the problems or the most frequently problems that happen when we are making cheese. And I'm going to give you the reason why this happens and the possible solution that you can um, do, that you can achieve so you can get a good cheese. Yeah, today, so far, we are 24,274 subscribers. So thank you very much for subscribing, people around the world, from Africa, from Australia, from Europe, from South America, United States, and or North America, Mexico are subscribing to my channel, and this is, I mean, I'm very pleased of it because it tells me that people wants to learn how to make cheese. We are growing pretty much the 1,000 subscribers per month, but we need to grow more. We need to grow at least 2,000 subscribers per month. So spread the voice that I would appreciate it. Spread the voice that I exist. Um, if people want to learn how to make cheese, you're in the right place, and you will learn how to make cheese. Okay. We have two new members in our membership program from YouTube, which is Carlos Acevedo. He's from Venezuela, from South America, and Brittany Lowens. She's from UK, and both of them are in the support category. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. Did help us to make more videos, to um, buy reactive, more equipment, and I have another tip that I want to show you. I realized in my last show in Spanish last week that we don't do anything if we make a good cheese. Okay, we make a good cheese, but if we are doing this as a business, we don't do anything making good cheeses if nobody can buy our product, or if our product is not safe. So I am developing a software that will monitor all the processes that when we are making cheese. You can make cheese at home, doesn't matter. As long as you comply with the system and your product is safe, you can sell it without problem. And you can apply for a license. Of course, you have to comply with some other terms of depending of the country that you are living. But the software that I'm developing will give you the system. It will the strength of this software is that you will be able to track back what happens into your cheese. To put an example, if you have a supplier that sends you an email, look, the batch number 1234 of the lactic culture that you bought me has ammonia, to say something, and you use this culture to make X amount of batches. Well, with my system, you will be able to trace which batches did you use the culture, because it's very user friendly, and you have to include all the batches, all the culture that you buy. You're gonna have to include it in the system, and the system, when you are making the cheese, automatically will show up the number of the available culture that you have, and you can choose put and use it, put the amount, and the system will trace everything. This is for a part of the system, but you don't. It will also help you how to sell your cheese. So I will include in this software, like this is a new business model called sales funnels. So this software will build a website for you, and you will be able to have your store online, and people will buy it from you, and you just and they could be able to pick them up from your premises, or you will be able to send them to each client depending of what they pay. So Arecon is a very good system. I'm using it. Okay. Of course, I'm doing it manually. I'm not doing with the software because I'm developing the software now. So I have my development team which is working on it, and it will be the first prototype will be ready maybe in 2 or 3 months. So I will share it to you later on. But this is one thing that I'm working so far. Okay, let's go to and watch the presentation. Today we're going to speak about the troubleshooting when we are making cheese. As I said before, there is always problem when we make cheese, and I'm going to tell you the reasons of each problem and the possible solution. Um, yeah, today maybe we're not going to go through because we have 10 problems with 10 solutions, and we'll not be able to finish them all today. So we carry on next week. Okay, so let's go with the presentation. But I also want to show you um, if you want to learn how to make cheese, I want to show you my, but I'm gonna do it later on. My cheese making course for beginners, but I'm gonna show it to you later on. Okay. Okay. As we say, when we are making cheese, we always have problems. Tell you for experience. Um, the milk doesn't coagulate. The rennet is too old. My cheese doesn't ripen correctly. So, or my curd is too soft, or too dry, or too hard. My pasta filata cheese, or like my mozzarella, is too yellow. I mean, sometimes we have this type of problem, and we don't know what to do because sometimes when we are making cheese, we just follow a recipe, and when we follow a recipe, that's not the way to make cheese. You need to know what happened to the cheese. That's why I developed my cheese course, because I want you to understand what happened to the cheese. What is the reason that something happens? If you don't know what's happening to the cheese, if you follow a recipe, you're gonna have problem for sure. But anyway, if you don't want to do the course, I will teach you roughly so the bit and pieces of the most common problems that happen when we are making cheese. So let's go with the first problem. If the computer wants to carry on. Okay, let me see. Okay, here we are. Problem number one. The most common problem. The milk does not curdle. It doesn't coagulate. So we put the milk into the pot. We heat it. We ripen. We inoculate the bacteria and the milk with the bacteria, or if we are using raw milk, we heat the milk, and we get to the right temperature, put the rennet, and the milk still liquid after 1 or 2 hours. So reason, many reasons. One of the reasons is that the milk have lack of calcium, or when sometimes when the milk coagulate I mean the rennet coagulate the milk, but the curd is too brittle, is too weak. This is the main reason, because when you have lack of calcium into the milk, you even though your milk is coagulated, if you get is curdled, it's weak, and when you break it, you get a lot of fine and therefore a lot of waste. So one of the reasons is that you have a low level of calcium into your milk. Another reason could be that maybe you didn't put enough rennet, or the rennet is too old. That's another reason. Okay, poor quality of the rennet. When the rennet is old or is expired, this happens. So, but you don't know. So one way to preserve the rennet is to put it into the fridge all the time. In this way, you can preserve your rennet for more time and extend the shelf life. Okay. Sometimes when we have a low level of acidity, your rennet will not work correctly. Okay, and that's the reason: low concentration of bacterial status. If you have a low concentration of starter cultures, your starter culture will not produce the, let's say, they won't produce the acidity or the right level of acidity that you need to get a strong curd. So therefore, you're gonna have a weak curd, and you'll with all the consequences. Weak curd means fine, more fine, waste, and less yield into your cheese. Okay. Um, if you have a low level of calcium, if you're using pasteurized milk and your milk is over pasteurized, when the milk is over pasteurized, your level of calcium tends to be lower. So if your milk is not pasteurized, if it is raw, your level of calcium will be complete. It will be native into your milk because it's not pasteurized. When we start applying heat to the milk through pasteurization, the pasteurization lowers or denature the calcium into your milk, and your level of calcium will start to decrease. Over pasteurization is means that your level of calcium will get lower. So when your milk is over pasteurized, or when your milk is ultra pasteurized or even homogenized, your curd will be weak. Okay. It's also when your milk is too has a low temperature, when it's too cold, the the curdling process, the coagulation process will be weak, and you're gonna have a weak curd. Okay, okay. What to do about it? I already gave you the reason. What to do about it? Okay, one of the things is pasteurize correctly could be one. Okay, but let's say something. Let's here is, if you have a low level of calcium in your next batch, because you can't do anything about it if you already curdled the milk and it's not pasteurized, and it's not sorry, and your curd is weak. So if you got a weak curd for your next batch, add calcium chloride to your pasteurized milk. So if you know that your milk is coming over pasteurized and it's coming and you're getting a weak curd for your next batch, because you can't do anything about it in this batch, put calcium chloride to your milk according to the manufacturer's instructions. Okay. Um, Another reason, and you have to go through. You have to go attending one variable by one. Okay. If you see that you put that you use milk and your milk is and your curd is weak, okay, add calcium chloride. Do it again, and if you get a strong curd, sorry, carry on with your process. But if you still have a weak curd, it means you have to attack the other another variable, which is, for example, your rennet might be expired, or it's maybe you put too low rennet. Sorry, you put too few, so you have to increase your level, your amount of rennet. So increase the dose of your rennet. Maybe your rennet is a little bit is expired, but not so expired. It's old, but not so old, and it's losing strength. So you have to increase the level of your rennet. You have to increase the amount of rennet to get the same effect. Okay, so or you can also leave your milk to ripen a little bit longer. If you generally, when we are making cheese, you have to leave also, it will also depend on the recipe that you use. You will have to wait for 1 hour, 45 minutes, half an hour, depending of the cheese that you make and the amount of rennet that you use. So, but if you, for example, are making um, let's say, Monster cheese, or you are making Roquefort cheese, and your coagulation time is 1 hour. But if you before you cut, you have to make the clean break. Okay? If you notice that your curd is still weak and you still have rest of milk into your curd, it means that the rennet hasn't have enough time. So you have to let it ripen, let it set a little bit more, so the chymosin that is into the rennet will attack. I mean, will carry on breaking down the proteins, and you're gonna get a stronger curd. Okay, so let the milk mature for a little while. Or if sometimes if the bacteria hasn't the lactic culture that you're using hasn't developed enough acidity or enough lactic acid, you need to let them develop more lactic acid so you can get a stronger curd. Okay, another solution is use non-homogenized milk. You can use pasteurized milk, but if you're using pasteurized milk, you have to use non-homogenized milk. But let's say that you can find non-homogenized milk. Well, first of all, how do you know that the milk is non-homogenized? To know where the milk is non-homogenized is because non-homogenized milk has like a layer of cream on the surface. But let's say that you can find the non-homogenized milk because in the country that you live, you can find it. Okay, you can use homogenized milk, but you have to use compulsorily calcium chloride. Okay, this is one solution that you need to know. Okay, let's see. Okay, problem number two. Sometimes when we are making cheese and we are ripening the cheese and we molding and put into the press or whatever, and then after unmolding the cheese and we cut it, we notice that our cheese tastes too sour. So what to do? Or what is the reason that this happened? Okay, the reason is that one of the reasons, if it is too sour, is because it has too much acid. Okay, this is one reason. Another reason is that your cheese is you have excessive of moisture into your cheese, and when you have excessive of moisture, the lactic bacteria will carry on producing acid, and that's the reason why your cheese is so acid. Okay, one is consequence of the other. So when you are making cheese, you and your cheese is too moist or too moist or too wet, um, you're gonna have lactic cultures working over there and feeding from the lactose and producing lactic acid, and your cheese therefore will become acid, too acid. Okay, see, the one is consequence of the other. And the other one is too much rennet. When you add too much rennet, your cheese, it's not that it's become a little bit sour, it becomes bitter. If you add too much rennet, your cheese will become bitter. And what you have to do to avoid this is reduce the amount of rennet so you can reduce the bitterness. Okay. Also, when your cheese is too sour, it's because you put maybe not enough salt. Okay, so you have to put the right level of salt. Not generally when we are making cheese, we work by standards: 1%, 2% of salt. In for example, when we are making Roquefort cheese, that this is the cheese that I love, and Parmesan cheese. These cheese are very salty. They usually use 5% of salt. But if we are making, for example, mozzarella, that is it's a very plain cheese that we hardly use salt, maybe 0.5% or even less. So, but this amount of salt it will depend on your choice. So you need to be careful. So a little amount of salt will give you the taste, a sour taste. Why? Because the salt masks all the flavors. For example, if you are making cheese, Roquefort cheese, let's say, or you are making, let's say, queso fresco, that the queso fresco is a cheese that have a low level of salt, 1%, half percent, 2%. But if you use too much rennet, your cheese will be bitter, and you can mask the bitterness of the cheese, increasing the amount of salt. So this is one way that you can mask the bitterness. And of course, this bitterness in the competitions is, I mean, the judges, they pick him up correctly. But if the judge doesn't have much experience, you can get away with the bitterness by increasing the level of salt. If the level of salt is low, your levels will not be level, and the bitterness will pop up, or will yeah, it will pop up over the other flavors. So if you put a right level of salt, it will be level with the level of bitterness, and you can get away with it. Okay. Solution. Okay. If your cheese is too wet, one solution to avoid to get it as a drier cheese is to increase the temperature. This process is called scalding. You have to scald the curd. Increase the temperature. This is also called second heat or second heatment. You also can increase the temperature. When you increase the temperature, your cheese will expel away and will become drier and will shrink. And this is one solution. And then it will lose moisture, and your cheese will become drier. Another solution that you can have to get away with the wet cheese is increase your starter dosage. Why? If your cheese didn't produce lactic acid, okay, as I said before, low acidity means a wetter cheese. So if you increase your starter culture, the amount that the use of the starter culture, they will feed from the lactose, and they will produce more lactic acid, and the lactic acid will help you to get the right level of acidity in your cheese. Okay. Um, if your cheese is too sour, well, another solution is decrease the dose of your rennet. Okay. And by decreasing the dose, your cheese will become more, I mean, the not so bitter, not so sour. What I always use, or what I always do when I'm making this type of cheeses is um, the manufacturer of the rennet, they always give you a bandwidth, the low level and the high level. I work in the middle, or maybe a little bit less, a little bit lower. In this case, I mean, you will be able to avoid this bitterness of the sourness of the cheeses. Okay? Don't work with the high bandwidth. Work with the pretty much from the middle or from the center, a little bit lower, and you won't have any problem. Okay. Another solution is increase the salt content to inactivate the acid production. That's another because the salt slower down the acid production, because the salt, the bacteria can tolerate salt. Some of them they do, but in general, bacteria, when you put salt on your curd, especially if it is dry salt, when we are making cheddar, for example, the salt will reduce or will slower down the acid production of your curd, and your cheese will not taste so sour or so acid. Okay. Well, these are the two solutions. Another problem is, for example, when the cheese is young and the cheese has too many holes. Okay, and the cheese blow up, and we can take it out from the mold. This happens very frequently, and this, when the cheese blow up, when the cheese expand into the mold, is because the cheese has produced gas inside, and it have increased the size, and it's very hard to take it out from the mold. Reason: cross contamination, basically. Okay, might be by E. coli. E. coli is Escherichia coli, okay, or Escherichia coli. E. coli is a bacteria that comes from coliforms. Coliforms comes from the droppings of the cows. When we are milking the cows, they always do droppings, okay, and these droppings splash into the uber or splashes into the milk. And when we are, especially when we are milking by hand, I mean, this is microscopic. The bacteria gets into the udder, and we don't. It's very hard to avoid it. Sometimes the milker doesn't clean the udder before milking. Sometimes the droppings falls into the concrete, into the if we have the place to milk the house to milk the cows, and sometimes the droppings falls into the floor. The flies are flying around. They step on the droppings, and then from the droppings they step on the milk. And there's needed only one bacteria to start the process. So this happens generally when we are making cheese with raw milk. That's the reason we have to pasteurize the milk, because it's, I would say, it's 99% possible that your milk is cross-contaminated with E. coli if we are making cheese with raw milk. So that's the reason we have to pasteurize. Okay. And another reason is that maybe your milk is pasteurized and you're using pasteurized milk, but your plant or your vats are dirty. Okay, you clean it only with water. No, don't use detergent. You have to use detergent, or you have to use chlorine solution. You have to sanitize everything, and if you don't do that, you're gonna have your poor hygiene protocols, and therefore you're gonna have, even though you're using pasteurized milk, you're gonna have your product cross contaminated, and by having it cross contaminated, your cheese will expand. There is another bacteria, not E. coli. There's another one that called Clostridium. Clostridium tyrobutyricum is another bacteria that produce gas into the cheese, especially in Swiss cheeses, and it is very aggressive, and the only way to kill it is um, by chemical sanitizing. Not even with heat. It reaches 95 degrees. So you will have it will survive at 95 degrees. So you kill it with chemical sanitizing, which is the one that I use, because if you use heat, okay, you might kill the bacteria for a while, but then it will get contaminated again. For example, if I put this glass into heat, okay, I put it into heat, it get sanitized out from the heat. But when I touch it with my hands, I already contaminated it. So that's the reason we use chemical sanitizing, because it's cheaper and it's faster. And each time that we're going to touch something related to the cheeses, I put my hands into the chlorine solution, and then I grab whatever I'm going to grab. Okay, so that's the way we avoid it. So another reason: poor hygiene. Okay, when we are using unpasteurized milk, I already talked about it, because the milk is raw. All the bacteria is there, good and bad. When we pasteurize the milk, we kill the bad bacteria, but we also kill the good bacteria. So that's the reason we have to inoculate the milk again with the lactic culture. Okay, solution. Okay, you have to, if you have holes into your cheese at early stage. Sorry, at early stage, is because your hygiene protocols are very poor, and you have to review them. You have to increase your protocol, and you have to um, avoid to have this contamination. How you achieve that? The procedure is improve your protocols. Okay, for example, if you are not sanitizing your, let's put an example. If you are making cheese and you're just washing with detergent and clean it with water and rinse it with water, and you make the cheese and you have holes, okay, next time you rinse your vat or your pot, rinse it again with wash it with detergent, rinse it, dry it, and then sterilize it with alcohol to put an example, or maybe with chlorine. Okay, once you put it in chlorine, you make your cheese, but you have to, and you don't get the holes. Let's say that you don't get the holes. So your system is working, but you need to document it. How do you document it? You need to take, when you make this cheese, cut a piece, send it to the lab. When you send it to the lab, it will tell you, okay, what is the aerobic plate count, E. coli, if you have E. coli, if you have um, Clostridium or whatever, if you have Listeria, Salmonella, if you don't have anything, okay, your system is working. You have, so you can carry on doing the whatever you're doing. All this process that I'm telling you here is gonna be are gonna be done automatically by the system that I'm developing, because I use it for my cheeses, and by developing a software will be very very accurate and very very reliable. Okay, so as I said before, improve your protocols. You have to use pasteurized milk, or you have to pasteurize your milk. And if you use, and you have to use, if you're using raw milk, you have to use it as fresh as possible. If your milk is, for example, 3 or 4 days old, it doesn't mean that it won't be, you will not have a good cheese, but your cheese will be better if your milk is fresh. Okay? Okay, problem four. We're gonna speak about this problem and one more, and then we leave. Okay, because we're about time. We're 32 minutes. Okay, problem number four. Sometimes when we are making cheese and we heat the curd, it doesn't stretch. Okay, cheese when heated does not melt or does not stretch, and it's brittle. Especially when we are making mozzarella, the mozzarella doesn't stretch. It happens very frequently. Okay, especially when people is starting to make cheese, they don't and they say, hey Dietrich, I use, and they call me, they send me text messages through WhatsApp or whatever, and they tell me, Dietrich, I started making mozzarella. I put the milk, I use raw milk, and I just curdle it, wait, way off, but it doesn't stretch. Okay, it happens. Why? The key to make stretchy cheese is to control the level of acidity. Lack of acidity or too much acidity will make your cheese not stretchy. Okay, so that's one reason. Okay, another reason is that you have a possible cross contamination with something that we call bacteriophage. Bacteriophage is a process, I have explained it many times, that bacteriophage, sometimes there are viruses into the milk. These viruses attack the lactic culture, and they inject their ADN or the DNA, the DNA. They inject the DNA into the lactic bacteria. This DNA will start to replicate into the bacteria, and the bacteria will not produce lactic acid anymore, and eventually they die, or she died. And when she dies, he won't produce lactic acid anymore. And this process happens. Each bacteria can reproduce between 40 and 150 times per hour. So imagine that you have 1 million bacteria into your milk, and these million bacteria reproduce 40 between 40 and 150 times per hour. So in 2 hours, you won't have bacteria. They will all die eventually. So that's one reason your milk does not stretch, because if the bacteria doesn't produce the lactic acid that you need to allow the curd to stretch, um, if you don't have the acid, your cheese will not stretch. So you're not gonna be in the bandwidth of the low level and the high level of acidity. So because your virus, or the virus that are into the milk, have killed the bacteria. Okay. Another reason is, but the key is the acid production. If you don't have acid production, might be for several reasons. One, bacteriophage. Second, that your cultures are dead or expire. It might happen. Maybe you don't have bacteriophage, but the culture that you have is expired. It's old, so you have to change it. So you have to attack variable by variable, one at a time. If you if you find out that you make a you start for the easy ones. Okay, I didn't have a stretchy cheese. Okay, I'm gonna check my culture. I'm gonna check the expiry date. No, isn't the expiry date. Okay, I'm gonna make a test. Put some milk and use the culture. If you notice that your level of acidity is increasing, your lactic culture is all right. So it's fine. Okay, now let's say that you are using if it's so you already this chart that your lactic culture is fine. So now you need to go with the other possible cause, which is the bacteriophage. So okay, you use the milk. If you have the problem, now it's the bacteriophage. So you have to attack variable by variable when you are making the cheeses. Okay, and maybe your milk is from a farmer, and the farmer has given or your milk is raw, and you are pasteurizing, but the farmer is selling you milk that has antibiotics, because maybe he has some cows that are sick, or that they have mastitis. So they're giving you, or they're giving the cows antibiotic. If you have antibiotic into your milk, the antibiotic will kill the lactobacteria, and therefore you won't have acid production. Okay, so this is another variable that you need to control. Okay, what happened here? Okay, another, maybe your calcium chloride. Okay, some people, when they are making stretchy cheese, mozzarella, for example, or provolone, or cream cheese from Colombia, they use chemical acidification. What they use lactic acid, but sometimes people don't know, and they use lactic acid and calcium chloride both at the same time. That's not good. When you are making stretchy cheeses with chemical acidification, you will not need to use calcium chloride. Okay, so but they do, because they don't know. So that's an improper use for calcium chloride. Or if you put too much calcium chloride and you are acidifying through lactic culture, maybe your level of calcium is because you put too much calcium chloride, your level of calcium is too high, and there is a balance between the calcium and the level of acidity. The acidity lowers the level of calcium. Talking in simple terms, your acidity will reduce the level of calcium. But if you have too much calcium into your curd, because you put it additionally, it will reduce, but it will not reduce enough. So you have to wait until the calcium is reduced to get a stretchy cheese. Okay. Solution. Well, I've been explaining you the cause and the solution. Okay. So another solution: let the cheese to mature inside the mold so that it develop acidity. Correct. When I was learning how to make mozzarella, I remember I didn't get a stretchy curd. I had the same problem that many people had. And I spoke with the cheesemaker, with the teacher by that time, and he told me, leave it. She will stretch sooner or later. And I didn't believe it. So what happened? Eventually, the curd will develop the acidity that she needs, and the cheese will stretch. Maybe when you are making the cheese and you try to stretch it, it doesn't stretch. But for several reasons, because your level of calcium is too low, is too high, or even if your acidity is correct, your level of calcium is too high, you have to allow to produce more acid to reduce the level of calcium that you have on the other side, and then you get a stretchy curd. So that's one reason. Okay. The other reason, your pH should be, if you want to monitor this, your pH should be between 5.1 and 5.3. But sometimes you can get a stretchy curd at 5.0 because, as I said before, your level of calcium was too high. And by increasing the acidity, which means lowering the pH 5.0, to put an example, your level of calcium was at the right point, and now you could get a stretchy curd. Okay? But it happens as well that you have a pH between 5.1 and 5.3, and your cheese doesn't stretch. It happens as well. So you have to, in this case, you have to do another reason, but that's another problem. There's a video in my channel, the 10 reasons why mozzarella doesn't stretch. Go have a look, and I'll tell you more details. Okay. It says here, another solution: change the species of initiator, which means the lactic culture. Sometimes when you are making cheese, you have bacteriophagy in your milk, and you don't have the lactic the acid that you need. So in this way, how to avoid it? Change the culture. If you are using, for example, Lactococcus lactis, change it to Lactococcus cremoris. To put an example, change the species of the culture. So in this way, the culture will be resistant to the bacteriophage, will know, and the bacteria will defend against the virus, and the virus will not be able to attack. Okay, by changing the culture. Some cultures are more would say weak. Some cultures are weaker than others to the attack of the virus, of the bacteriophage. So by changing your culture, you will avoid this. Okay. And another reason, another solution to make pasta filata cheeses, which is cheeses, stretchy cheeses, use non-homogenized milk. If you make cheese with homogenized milk, forget about getting a stretchy curd. The stretchy curds, you can only achieve it with unpasteurized milk, raw milk, or pasteurized non-homogenized milk. Other type of milk, forget about it. You won't get it. Okay, so don't try to invent the wheel, because this is is explained in the books. So don't try to make cheeses with homogenized milk. I mean, don't try to make stretchy cheeses with homogenized milk. Okay. Another solution: do not use calcium chloride. Okay. And I reckon we don't have more time. We're gonna leave this problem number 5 for next week. Okay. So thank you for coming. I was gonna talk to you about my cheese course for beginners, but we don't have time. We'll talk about it next time, and don't worry, I'll explain you in more detail for next week about the cheese course for beginners. So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Spread the voice that I exist. Okay, and if you want to learn how to make cheese, take my cheese course for beginners. I'm gonna give you let me give you I didn't even have time to answer the questions from the audience, and let me answer one. Let me answer one. It says here, I have 5. It says here, Tracy is asking, most cheese recipes call for adding the culture, letting some time pass for acidification to occur when adding the rennet, and letting more time pass so that the curd can set. What would happen if I added the culture and then immediately after added the rennet and let the acidification happen while the rennet is in the pot? For example, if I need to run an errand and won't be home in time to add the rennet, can I add it early and still let the same total amount of time pass until I get a clean break? Thanks. That's a very good question, Tracy. Okay, I'm gonna explain. I'm gonna go to this question. The thing is that when you are using, it will depend of the type of bacteria that you use. If you use direct set bacteria, it's like a powder, and the bacteria inside the milk is sleeping. Okay, because it comes from the freezer. It's freezer. It's slept. The bacteria is already slept, or is still slept, and you need to put it in heat so she can awake. You can do that if you are using this type of culture. Okay, and the bacteria is slept. You put into you heat the curd. Sorry, you heat the milk, put the bacteria, and coagulate again. Doesn't matter. Your bacteria still slept. You can go after 2 hours, but the thing is, your curd, because you are letting your curd too much time exposed to the rennet, maybe you can get a rubbery curd because the chymosin have been acting too long. Of course, by leaving it 2 hours, the bacteria will awake in the first hour, and in the second hour will start to produce lactic acid. She will start to feed from the lactose and produce lactic acid. The thing is that when you are allowing your curd to let it for 2 hours, you need to maintain the temperature. So you need to be careful and be able to maintain the temperature during this time that you are leaving. If you can guarantee that your temperature is maintained, it's fine. You can go ahead with it. The other way around is if you are using live culture. For example, if you are using all whey from your last batch and you heat your milk and put the rennet at the same time, and you go for 2 hours, the bacteria, the whey that you put is alive, and it will start feeding from the lactose and producing the lactic acid. And in 2 hours, your level of acidity will be very high, and you will get you will not have the same texture of a fresh cheese. You will have a different texture. So you need to be careful. Okay, if you're gonna leave, you might leave, but not for too long. Okay, I hope I have answered your question. Okay, thank you for coming, guys. I really appreciate it. As I said before, spread the voice that I exist. And remember, let me see, Oscar. Hi, Oscar from Venezuela. How are you? And NLAM is saying hi, excellent. And the other one says Dak Copa. We're speaking in Spanish, but no, this program is in English. Thank you for coming, really, you guys. But if you want to speak, if you want to go to the show in Spanish, it's at 9:30 New Zealand time. Okay, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome to be here as well, but you have to interact in English because everyone is doing it in English. Okay, but thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Okay, I understood you. I understood your messages. I really appreciate it. Spread the voice that I exist. So more people can join and learn about cheese making. And next week, we're gonna carry on with the other 5 problems and solutions when we are making cheese. Okay, so see you next week and bye bye.
Quesitos en casa, fáciles de hacer son. El doctor Quesero te enseña con sabor. Quesitos en casa, fáciles de hacer son. El doctor Quesero te enseña con sabor. Quesos colombianos y venezolanos, todo hecho en tu casa, con sabor zuliano y calor humano. Los quesos en casa tienen vitaminas, rápidos de hacer, en cualquier cocina, tan fácil